Urban Environmental Accords, UEA
Now, let's get started with the Embassy in the Republic of Korea session of 2021 UEA YEOSU Summit. Hello, everyone. I am Dong-woo Yang, Senior Researcher of International Climate and Environment Center. Thank you for sharing your valuable time with us here, either online or in person. In this session, ambassadors and diplomats to the Republic of Korea will make presentation on their effort to realize Green Deal and Net Zero, followed by panel discussions on carbon neutrality and climate change. Let me introduce our honored invitees here. First, here are presenters of session. Ramzi Teymurov, Ambassador, Embassy of the Republic of Azerbaijan, Korea. Santiago Moye, Third Secretary, Embassy of the Argentine Republic. Johnny Reynoso Vasquez, Chief of the Diplomatic Mission, Embassy of the Republic of Ecuador. Zokir Shaidov, Deputy Chief of Mission, Embassy of the Republic of Uzbekistan. Rasha Atamni, Deputy Head of Mission, Embassy of Israel. Peter Norman Bangsbo, Executive Director, Innovation Center, Embassy of Denmark. Amin Jagdood, Second Secretary, Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Federico Alberto Coelho Camilo, Ambassador, Embassy of the Dominican Republic. Now, next up panel discussion. Daum Matute Mejia, Ambassador, Embassy of Peru. Rodrigo Cornel Quinnog, Ambassador, Embassy of the Republic of Nicaragua. And Wende Mwenji, Ambassador, Embassy of the Republic of Kenya. Roberto Rizzo, Deputy Head of Mission, Embassy of Italy. Francisco Gonzalez, Ambassador, Embassy of Colombia in Korea. In addition to our presenters, we have honored guests attending online and in person. Abu Pashi, First Secretary, Embassy of Angola. Kubanishbek Muhaliev, Third Secretary, Embassy of Kyrgyzstan. Luis Pablo Ocio, Charge d'Affaires, Embassy of Bolivia. I would like to give my special thanks to all of you who are with us here for this meaningful event. Before the session begins, we have two specials. And we also have Alfredo Bascu, Embassy of the Argentine Republic. Yes. Before the session begins, we have two special speakers. First, remarks will be delivered by Mr. Oh Bong-kwon, Mayor of the City of YEOSU. The City of YEOSU organized the summit with Mayor's tremendous support. Mr. Mayor, please come and give a speech.
2021
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2021 UEA YEOSU Summit. To the honorable ambassadors and representatives from the foreign missions to the Republic of Korea, I'd like to welcome you all to our event. YEOSU is the leading marine tourism city, and I am the mayor of YEOSU, Kwon Oh-bong. And to all of our ambassadors and other participants who are connected online, and to the citizens who are watching through our YouTube channel, I'd like to welcome you as well. From 20 countries, we have efforts put in place for discussing ways to have sustainable development through net zero. So all of the representatives of these countries have gathered together here in YEOSU. Despite the difficult COVID situation, the efforts for net zero continues on, and this will be the foundation for a brighter future for us all. Last December, Republic of Korea announced the 2050 net zero vision. And YEOSU City also last April declared our 2050 YEOSU City net zero vision. And as a local government, we have presented our strong commitment to this goal. In fact, the biggest petrochemical complex is right here in YEOSU City. So we have very bad conditions in terms of realizing this goal of net zero. However, the citizens, the public, and the private sectors have all committed to this goal, and we have come up with specific action plans, and we are committed to heading towards the path of 2050 net zero and having sustainable development in our cities through net zero. YEOSU City will be leading this effort. In 2023, the 28th Conference of the Parties of UNFCCC will be held. YEOSU City and other cities in the South Coastal and South region of Korea have joined hands to be successful in bidding to host the COP28. We have done a lot of preparatory work, and we are confident that we will be successful in hosting the COP28, and we will be able to set new way forward as well as present solutions for responding to climate change. So I'd like to ask for your continued support and interest to all of the participants here. 2021 UEA YEOSU Summit. Thank you very much for participating in our event today, and we hope that the discussions today will be translated into concrete actions for sustainable development through net zero for our cities. And I hope you will take back with you beautiful memories from here, YEOSU. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor. The next speech came from Mr. Yong-Sub Lee, co-chair of the UEA and mayor of Gwangju Metropolitan City. On behalf of the co-chair, Mr. Dr. Won Tae-yoon, Secretary General of the UEA, will read his message.
Good afternoon. My name is Won Tae-yoon. I'm Secretary General of the UEA. On behalf of UEA co-chair, Mr. Yong-Sub Lee, the mayor of Gwangju Metropolitan City, I would like to deliver his welcome address. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for the 2021 UEA YEOSU Summit. I would like personally thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here today, despite the difficulties presented by COVID-19. I'm truly grateful we are able to gather like this to share each country's carbon neutrality policies and visions. International efforts to outcome the current climate crisis can be explained as energy transition and the carbon neutrality by 2050. Through our concerted efforts, it is possible to us to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. However, the science is clear. Even if we reach this goal, the effect of climate change on the environment will be felt for decades to come. The future of our cities depends on the decisions we make now. To create a vision and implement a system for the economic and the social transition towards carbon neutrality and sustainability. The international community and the United Nations have emphasized the crucial role of cities and local governments. In response to this call to action, Gwangju Metropolitan City, where I live, is focusing on creating a smart city that can integrate the post-industrial revolution at the urban level and adapt to cope with the climate crisis. The smart city creation policy focuses on the harmonized integration of three main components, namely energy independencies, smart transportation network, and a climate crisis and natural disaster response system. The creation of such a smart cities can provide a safeguard from intensified natural disasters and ensure the sustainable development potential of our urban communities. Gwangju promises to become a city resilient to natural disasters and the effects of climate change to achieve energy independence through carbon neutrality by 2045. To become a city of justice that fulfills its responsibilities to our future generations. I hope that this conference will provide an opportunity for meaningful exchange as each country shares their visions, policies, and their efforts toward carbon neutrality. Further, I hope to continue and strengthen the relationships we built here today to work in cooperation with national and local governments to achieve our common goal of creating a globally sustainable future. Again, I'd like to congratulate the distinguished participants in the Embassies in Korea session and sincerely look forward to its successful outcomes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the kind message, Mayor Lee. Now, let us commence the session. As briefly mentioned earlier, honored guests from 7 embassies to the Republic of Korea will make presentations on climate change response and net zero in their nations. This session will be chaired by Dr. Won-tae Yoon, the UEA Secretary General and President of International Climate and Environment Center. Here come again the Secretary General to continue the session.
Good afternoon again here. I am here again. And so anyway, it's a great pleasure and honor for me to chair this important session. My name is Won-tae Yoon, the Secretary General of the UEA. I'm particularly pleased that we have with us an array of eminent participants. Thank you for joining this meaningful event. We have with us nowadays, every country is trying to pursue a policy of carbon neutrality by 2050. For achieving this goal, each country needs to design its own long-term strategies and develop resilient pathways that are consistent with the Paris Climate Agreement. In this session, we have an unusual opportunity to hear from various speakers. They will inspire us, challenge us, how to build sustainable society and how to build sustainable ecosystems. Okay, this session consists of two parts. Thematic presentation from 7 countries, and we have also a panel discussion by 6 panelists. To begin with, each presenter will be given just 7 minutes for a presentation. After that, we will have 2 minutes Q&A time. And now, I want to invite our first speaker, His Excellency Ramzi Temurov, Ambassador of Azerbaijan to Korea. He'll give a presentation on the topic of environmental challenges caused by the conflicts. Ambassador, please.
Yep, I got it. But you need to show me how to use it. Next page, this one, right? Okay, back. All right, good. Well, first of all, since I am the first speaker on behalf of the Diplomatic Corps, I would like to extend our great appreciation to the YEOSU Mayor, as well as UEA Organizer Committee for hosting us today in this difficult times of pandemic. It is great to be back in the YEOSU, and it's good to see all of you. Thank you very much. So my presentation is about the recent developments in our region, and I think this is one of the areas that international community somehow is neglecting to take a look what environmental challenges can be caused by the conflicts. And especially since last year we experienced the former Armenian-Azerbaijan Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, I wanted to bring up this case study for your as an introduction. So I will go ahead and talk about the brief introduction. This is about the conflict. We had 2 phases of the conflict. First one was happened 1991, 1994, and the second one was happened last year. It took only 44 days. And I'll briefly talk about the environmental, urban, and humanitarian catastrophes caused by the first conflict, and brutal attack to the environment by the state and non-state actors due to the lack of central government control, and what are the plans of the Azerbaijani government on the environmentally friendly reconstruction of the liberated territories, and cross-case similarities between Korea and Azerbaijan on post-conflict reconstruction policies. So briefly, this is what the map is showing the former conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. As you can see, that area on the left side was under the control of Armenian forces for almost 30 years. So it was containing around 20% of Azerbaijan's territory. And on the down, you can, I don't know if you can read it, but this is the damage that caused by the conflict. Briefly, from the humanitarian perspective, I must say that the occupation of the territories caused around 700,000 Azerbaijanis became IDPs, internally displaced people. And I will now pass on because I know that I have very limited time. It's almost 20% of our territories were occupied. 20,000 people were killed. Around 900 settlements, 115,000 houses, almost 7,000 public buildings were almost destroyed. And this includes also the infrastructure facilities. You can see it on the down, like electricity, water pipelines, communication lines, they all were destroyed. And from the environmental point of view, this area was containing 185,000 hectares of cultivated areas, and 645,000 hectares arable lands remained under occupation. So this is just for your comparison. The same city, Agdam city, which was the first one, is the pre-occupation time, and you can see that it was even you can see the minarets of the mosque. And you can see that it was that time developed city with the green city, we'd call it. But this is what we left after the occupation. In the second page, you can see only minarets of the mosque remains. The entire city is totally destroyed. It's like, I had the chance to visit this area this summer. It's like a Hiroshima of Caucasus. It's like an atomic bomb fall there, and you see that almost no green or no trees left behind. So environmental damage, here I tried to summarize it, that almost 70,000 hectares of specially protected natural areas, 260,000 of forests, and for example, 215 natural monuments and so on existed before the occupation. More than 460 types of wild trees and shrubs have grown in this area. But after occupation, unfortunately, almost all of this have been massively cutting down. Eastern plains, walnut, oak, and other tree species, and selling to the other foreign countries. After occupation, chopping down of the forests and in the occupied territories, we observed, and illegal disposal of nuclear and radioactive waste in the occupied territories. So Armenia is containing one of the nuclear power plants. Instead of putting the waste in their own territory, they brought them up and used our former occupied territories for the waste purposes. And the specific one is about the Okuchay River. I wanted to share it with you. This river starts from the territory of Armenia. It comes all the way down to the Azerbaijan liberated territories. The pictures doesn't need any explanation. You can see how much it is polluted. And unfortunately, the owner of the company, manufacturer company, is one of the European countries, belongs to one of the European countries. And when we claim to the European countries about this mass, the answer is that this company is not operating in that European company, but it is operating in another country. So we cannot say anything to this. We cannot do anything. I think this is the issue that the UEA maybe and other environmental friendly organizations should consider, because the companies, regardless of their locations, should have the responsibility of the environment. So and this is the pictures that we just recently took out, how the forests were totally destroyed, and the fire were purposely created by the occupied forces. And liberated territories, we have the concept of green energy and smart village. We want to develop the liberated territories based on the green energy and smart city and smart village concepts. Those are just samples about that. And I also put down here about the similarities, but I don't have any time to talk about it. I hope that you will have a chance to see more detailed information in the booklet. I thank you very much, Emma. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. We have just limited time. Now, the presentation is open now. 2 minutes, just 2 minutes questions. If anyone have questions. No? Oh, okay. Now, next speaker is Mr. Santiago Mole, Third Secretary, Embassy of the Argentina Republic. Please. He'll give a presentation on the topic of national climate policy.
Hello. First, I would like to thank the organizers for putting together this wonderful event and for inviting the embassies to be part of it. I'm honored and happy to share this forum with so many respectable diplomats from all over the world. It gives me hope to see all of us here sharing our visions about climate change. In the later days, we've seen world leaders expressing their concerns about climate change in the United Nations General Assembly, but also their efforts and commitment to fight against it. The COVID-19 pandemic is showing us how interconnected we are and what kind of results we get when we try to solve global threats with individual approaches. As you may already notice, I am not an expert in climate change. I'm just a diplomat worried about the health of our planet. But this issue is so important and crucial that requires all of us to get involved. Climate change is the ultimate global challenge of our time, a real existential struggle. There is no individual solution to it. Either we overcome it together or we fail it together. But this challenge is a tricky one. We only have one planet Earth, so failure is not an option. So my message for you today is simple. Argentina is fully committed to fight climate change. We have made the fight against climate change a state policy. In accordance with the Paris Agreement, in 2019, our Congress passed into a law a minimum budget for adaptation and mitigation. This law created the National Cabinet of Climate Change, responsible for designing the national climate policy and formed by a wide range of actors, from the highest level of government to regular citizens. The same law also ordered the National Cabinet to coordinate the elaboration of the National Plan for Adaptation and Mitigation to Climate Change, which will be published very soon. Regarding our nationally determined contribution, or NDC, we presented our first proposal in 2016, which established a commitment to not to exceed 482.77 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2030. In 2020, we increased our efforts and made a second NDC, establishing a new limit, 358.8 metric tons. And last April, during the Leaders' Summit on Climate Change, we pushed our ambition a little further, and we went for 349.16 metric tons. This means that we have increased our mitigation commitment 27.7% when compared to our first NDC back in 2016. Regarding our adaptation, we have committed to raise awareness about the danger that climate change poses for all of us and the measures to be adopted in order to make a contribution in the fight against it. To adapt our infrastructure, communities, and productive systems, and to prioritize the more vulnerable ones, and to incorporate a gender and intergenerational approach in our climate policies. Here you can see the evolution of our mitigation goals determined by our different NDCs. In 2016, the yellow line, in 2020, the green line, and in 2021, the light blue line. So we will fulfill our commitments following 4 strategic guidelines. First, awareness to improve the understanding of the topic. Second, strategic planning that requires a huge effort to build the agreements needed to develop a strategy that contains a comprehensive long-term vision. Third, capacity building to act effectively and efficiently. And fourth, public participation to make sure everyone gets involved in the discussion on how to tackle the agenda and to promote cultural changes. Although this implementation of our second NDC is not contingent on international support, we strongly believe that a commitment from developed countries and international organizations will generate significant global benefits. Lately, Argentina has been especially affected by its debt, but many other developing countries also had to borrow money during the COVID-19 pandemic. For us, debt swaps for climate action, payment mechanisms for ecosystem services, and the concept of environmental debt held by less developed countries are key to exiting the current crisis. We celebrate the commitment shown by developed countries and international organisms, and we ask them to go even further to make sure no one will be left behind. As you all know, the Paris Agreement invites countries to formulate and submit long-term development strategies with low greenhouse gas emissions in order to provide a long-term horizon for its NDC and the achievement of those goals. As I mentioned before, we are currently in the final stages of our long-term plan, which will set the framework with specific goals, guiding lines, and transversal actions. The goal is carbon neutrality by 2050. The plan must be consistent with the various programs, actions, and public policies promoted along this path. We believe that in order to succeed, we have to work on the three dimensions of the sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental, in an integrated way, proposing a comprehensive roadmap. Innovation will be key if we really want to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. We need new and disruptive technology, new patterns in the production process, but also in the demand for goods and services. Of course, all this innovation requires investment. As I mentioned before, there is no individual solution for climate change, and that is probably the main reason why more direct foreign investment, more international financing, and even more innovative instruments are needed. The carbon neutrality must be achieved through a sustainable development path. We have to reduce vulnerability to the impacts of climate change. We have to think about the job transition and the creation of new jobs. We have to incorporate a gender perspective, and we have to take into account the impact on health, ecosystems, and biodiversity. We have to promote technological development. We have to secure our food and energy, and we have to contribute to the circular economy. In summary, we have to redefine our way of life. The challenge is huge, and we cannot afford to fail. Argentina is fully committed to join the global efforts in order to succeed. The time is now. Thank you.
Thank you. Please stay there. Thank you for your good presentation. The presentation is now open for the questions. If you have any questions, we have now a little more time. Yeah, please.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Could you perhaps elaborate the financially crisis happened in Argentina? How have that impacted the climate ambitions?
Well, actually, the point in the presentation was to highlight the idea of Argentina to introduce the discussion about how we can exchange soaring debt with climate actions. We believe that climate action is needed for all the countries. Some countries have the means to implement it, and some others don't have that means. So we think that it will be good for the planet as a whole, for the whole international community, to share this commitment and to think or to consider to exchange this debt, not all, of course, but some debt for climate actions. So we are preparing a formal proposal for that, and we hope that that will lead the path for other countries that are in a similar situation as well.
Yep. Any other questions? I have one. As we have emphasized in the presentation, the capacity building, you have emphasized in your presentation, as you talked about the capacity building in the area of climate education or in the area of climate action.
Well, actually,
What is
both.
more oriented, and also this capacity building oriented more climate action or climate education? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, well, we think that, as I said in the last part of my presentation, we have to redefine the whole way of life. So that doesn't happen from night to day. So we think it's important to build both the capacity in the education of the people, the next generation, and also of course, in infrastructure, and not only in the production process, but also in the consumption process. So I think we all have to incorporate the situation, the desperate situation in that we are now, and that's the main point of this capacity building.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Big applause, please. The next speaker, I want to invite His Excellency Johnny Reynosa Vasquez, Chief of the Diplomatic Mission of Ecuador to Korea. He'll give a presentation on the topic of constitutional rights of the nature.
Well, good afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon, distinguished authorities, and thank you so much for coming here. And also, it's a pleasure to be here with the colleagues and excellencies. It's a pleasure to have this presentation to you, distinguished guests. As I say, my presentation is about the constitutional rights of the nature. So it was a very innovative part of the law that we introduced in the Constitution of Ecuador several years ago. So I will start with the presentation. The rights of the nature start in Ecuador in the Constitution of 2008. Ecuador was the first country in the world to codify the rights of the nature. And the rights approach is a breakaway from traditional environment regulation systems. Let's say why we put these rights in the Constitution of Ecuador, and what is Ecuador in terms of nature for the world and for Latin America. So Ecuador is one of the most species-rich countries in the world. It's the most biodiverse country in the world, and we have 30 protected areas. It represents the 70% of the territory is protected as we used to call national parks. It means that we cannot touch that part of the territory in any way. We have several important parks, for example, the Galapagos National Park, which is, a reserve in the Galapagos Islands. Also, we have the Cotopaxi National Park, where we preserve one of the most beautiful volcanoes in the world. And also we have, for example, Yasuni National Park, which we have one of the biggest reserves of petroleum in the world, but we cannot touch it due to this regulation of consideration of national park. So, as you know, Ecuador has 4 wards in the same territory. We are a very small country, but we have 4 wards in our territory. We start with the Galapagos Islands. As I say, Galapagos Island is a paradise in the earth. We can discover species that we cannot find in any part of the world. You can see we have the Galapagos species, which are the biggest turtles in the world, and also we have this reserve of sharks, and also this reserve of species in the sea and in the islands. Also, we have the coast. The coast region is also one of the most beautiful in Latin America and one of the most visited in that part of the world. Here, also, we have the biggest mountains of the Andean system. Here you can see one of the most beautiful volcanoes in the world, which is Cotopaxi Volcano. And this is the reserve of the Cotopaxi National Park. As I say, this is a volcano in Ecuador, which is one of the most beautiful and preserved in the world. Here you can see the avenue of the volcanoes. Just in this location, you can see 7 volcanoes. And this is one of the biggest reserves of mountains in the world. And here you can see the tallest mountain in the world, which is Chimborazo volcano. Maybe you will say that Everest is the tallest mountain in the world, and that's right, but Everest is considered from the level of the sea to the top, but Chimborazo volcano is considered from the middle of the earth until the top of Chimborazo mountain. So it means that Chimborazo mountain is the closest point to the sun. And now we can see the Amazon jungle, which is, part of the biggest reserve of jungle in the world, which is the Amazon jungle, which several countries in Latin America share this biggest reserve of biodiversity. And one of them is Ecuador. So with this background about the natural treasures that we have in Ecuador, and due to I don't have much time, I will tell you why we put these rights and what is the implication and what is the change in the legal way between the past and the future. It gives legal personality to the nature. It means that we pass from object to subject of rights. But it means that the natural object has a legally recognized worth and dignity in its own right and not as a simple object. Most of the people could say, but how we can recognize this to some forest or to some mountain because they are not alive and they cannot go to the courts and they cannot start any process. But some people criticize that, but just like streams and forests do not have the power to speak for themselves, neither do the corporation, the states, infants, municipalities, or other more. So lawyers and the state could speak for them. And as a custodian of own rights, it means that the nature has their own right, and the state and the lawyers can speak for the protection of that right. So, just for going in fast track, because we don't have time, I want to explain you several articles of this new innovative law. So it's that the persons are bearers of rights and shall enjoy the rights guaranteed in the Constitution and international instruments. So nature shall be subject of rights. As I say, it's subject now, not object of rights, as it was in the past. So some of the articles, especially the Article 71, implies 3 rights to the nature. One is the existence. Nature has the right of the existence, also the maintenance and the regeneration. So this is very important 3 things that the nature has in the Constitution as a constitutional right. It's same as, for example, the right of the life, of the right of the liberty, of the right of the freedom for the people. Also, we have these rights for the nature. And nature, we consider all the environments that are part of the earth in our territory. For example, the Article 72 is also very interesting because it talks about the restoration. It means that, the state and also owner country have to do everything in their hands in order to make possible the restoration of the nature when it is damaged. So I have several seconds. So I will continue with this. Here I have a very important, interesting thing that I want to finish. It was the first case that we had regarding rights of the nature. So it was the winner against Loja. Loja is a city in Ecuador, which, let me explain you in very fast track. It happened that when they were building a new speed highway in Ecuador, they just damage or they interrupt the water of a river. So the water in that time increased the speed. So according to people from that part, they believe that, that it was a very serious damage of that important river in that location. So they established a legal process in the court, and they won the process. So it established a very good precedent in order to claim for the rights of the nature. So this is in fast track the rights of the nature. Sorry, I have 1 minute more. I use 8 minutes. So this is my presentation, and if you have any question, we can continue. Thank you so much.
Now it's time for a question. Thank you for a good presentation. Anyone have a question or comments to the presentation?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Johnny. Now I want to turn over to Mr. Jokia Saidok, Deputy Head of Mission of Uzbekistan to Korea.
Dear Chair, Mr. Won Tae-yoon, UEA Secretary General, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, on behalf of Embassy of Uzbekistan in Seoul, I would like to extend our gratitude for extending invitation to participate in today's very important event. We welcome and highly appreciate the initiatives and efforts of our Korean partners in addressing the acute issues of sustainable development and promoting the green agenda at the global level. Distinguished participants of today's forum, the pandemic has shown how the human health and the state of the environment, as well as economic and social progress, are interconnected. We can no longer ignore the signals that the nature itself is sending us. Unfortunately, the climatic changes are increasing. In Central Asia, the average annual temperature has increased by about 1 degree for over the past 30 years. The decline in the flow of major rivers and the biodiversity in our region causes a deep concern. The problems of greenhouse gases and large-scale atmospheric pollution are worsening. Yet nobody doubts that the actions of countries to achieve the green development goals must be more active and more effective. We do not have another choice. In Uzbekistan, we have started this important work. We are implementing a comprehensive strategy for the transition to a green economy, as well as a program for the development of renewable and hydrogen energy. In the framework of Paris Agreement, we have committed to reduce the greenhouse gas emission by 10% by 2030. Widespread introduction of green technologies and implementation of projects in green energy in Uzbekistan will allow in the next 10 years to increase the share of renewable energy sources by more than 3 times. We were the first in the region to join the global green growth. We were the first in the region to join the Global Green Growth Institute to establish its office in the capital city of Uzbekistan. GGI's role is to support Uzbekistan's environmentally sustainable economic growth through green growth projects, building on development initiatives by the government at the national and local level, in collaboration with other development partners. GGI Uzbekistan Country Planning Framework for 2021-2025 is the strategy for the GGI Uzbekistan program for the next 5 years. In the CPF period GGI will focus on supporting the government in developing and updating policies to create an enabling environment for green investments and prepare projects to directly mobilize investments for the climate, resilient agriculture, waste management, and green buildings. These efforts will align the national goals and priorities expressed in National Development Strategy for 2017-2021 and strategy for Uzbekistan's transition to green economy 2019-2030. On May 13th, President of Uzbekistan Shavkat Mirziyoyev took part in the second international summit P4G in Seoul in a format of video conference. The President of Uzbekistan outlined the key directions of the reforms being carried out in Uzbekistan and shared his visions of the prospects for international cooperation in the green recovery. First, overcoming the global consequences of RLC disaster. Through the broad implementation of green technologies, overcoming the global consequences of RLC catastrophe was identified as one of the priority tasks. In this regard, the leader of Uzbekistan thanked all international partners for their support and recently adopted, on the initiative of Uzbekistan, a special resolution of UN General Assembly on declaring the RLC region a zone of environmental innovations and technologies. It was proposed to continue active joint work in this direction, including within the framework of specially created UN Trust Fund and GGI on the platform of P4G partnership and other international institutions. Second, striving to achieve the carbon neutrality through the development of green energy. We have started the implementation of major projects for the construction of solar and wind power plants. We intend to increase the share of renewable energy sources to more than third-fold in the next 10 years. Uzbekistan set a goal to bring the capacity of solar power plants up to 5,000, wind power plants up to 3,000, hydroelectric power plants up to 4,000 megawatts by 2030. Uzbekistan collaborates on the Milestone project with Masdar, one of the world's leading renewable energy company. And the implementation of these kind of new projects will help Uzbekistan to supply with electricity and decrease the annual it will increase the annual production of capacity of electricity. Moreover, we are closely cooperating with neighboring states in the development of best hydroenergy potential of our region. President Shavkat Mirziyoyev put forward an initiative to hold in Uzbekistan in 2022 the International Conference Green Energy for Developing Countries. Third, we propose to launch a special program to involve youth to building a green economy. One of the central initiatives voiced by our president at the P4G summit was the proposal to launch a special program to attract young people to build a green economy to form a culture of green consumption. In Uzbekistan, about 60% of population is children and youth under the age of 30. Therefore, the head of our state pays special attention to supporting young people, providing opportunities for their self-realization and contributing to the future prosperity of our country. Young people are valuable and critical resources to invest in, and this investment will pay off many years over in the future. In modern world, creative, proactive young people with modern knowledge and skills are drivers of sustainable development. With the right of investment in the development of youth today, it is these young men and women who tomorrow can become the driving force and the generation that will bring Uzbekistan to a new level of social economic development. Fourth, we stand for a close cooperation aimed at supporting the growing confidence of the financial sector and investors in a green technology. To this end, Uzbekistan is ready to join the P4G partnership and become its full-fledged member. In conclusion, I would like to express confidence that the outcomes of today's summit also will serve to enhancing our practical interaction in the framework of this important international environmental platform. I wish all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacket. Thank you for your good presentation. Now it's time for questions and comments. If we have questions, you talked about, also in your presentation, you talked about the GGGI. As the GGGI have established an institution in Tashkent.
Yeah, of course. As I told during my presentation, Uzbekistan became the member of GGGI in 2019 as the first country between the CIS countries. So this year we have established the office of GGI in capital city of Uzbekistan, in Tashkent. Then it started its operating, and now we have 2 members from GGI working in this representative office who are conducting with our national ministries and agencies, and together with Korean cooperation agency KOICA, also collaborating and developing some new projects in this area.
As mainly this institute is, as the purpose of this institute is mainly green growth, also for green growth economy, also to boost green growth economies, right?
Yes, of course. As I mentioned during my presentation, we have several issues which is very important, but the green growth economy, green development is one of the main directions of our national policy. Therefore, we are developing our renewable energy sector, and also we are thinking about paying very serious attention to the Aral Sea disaster. This is one of the main very serious issue for our country, not only for our country, but the whole world, I think. Therefore, we are very closely collaborating with GGI also to carry out some new projects to solve this kind of problems.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Ms. Rasha Atemni, Deputy Head of Mission of Israel to Korea. She will give a presentation on the topic of very interesting clean tech and regional cooperation, right? Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for inviting us to this wonderful conference. I have to say on a personal note that, well, we all know that climate change has become or have been reduced to this hashtag that we see on Twitter, hashtag climate change. But I'm afraid that not as many people know exactly what that means and how dangerous that is. At least, I mean, I can say humbly from my part, as I was preparing for this presentation and as I learned more about climate change, I have to say that it's not just urgent, it's life or death situation by this point. And I really hope that all the nations together, we can get to a point that we can actually rebuild rather than a point of no return. Okay, let's start. These are the things that I'm going to talk about in my presentation. I will introduce policy changes in Israel in order to promote climate change. I will give a few examples of clean tech technologies for the environment. I picked one specific startup that's called Watergen. Just to give you a heads up, it's about generating water from air. And finally, I will conclude with regional cooperation for climate and agriculture. All right, so Israel has put ahead of its vision realizing by 2050 the climate goals. These percentages are in comparison to 2015. So Israel wants to reduce the greenhouse gases emissions by 85%, and while the interim target should be cutting emissions by 23% by 2030. I will give you a few examples of what sort of projects or initiatives are being done in Israel in order to achieve this. Firstly, 96% reduction in carbon emissions from transport. One example is in the city planning area, managing parking lots or parking areas and limiting parking areas to zero-emission cars, meaning cars that are based or mobilized by electricity, by hydrogen, and so on. Another example would be having green buses or green transportations, meaning that the transportation vehicle would be mobilized by renewable energy. This renewable energy, that's something that, unlike other countries, we don't have strong wind, we don't have strong water streams to create hydroelectricity, but what we do have is a lot of a lot of sunlight. 60% of Israel is actually a desert, and that's something that we can use for the advantage of the environment. So the goal is to achieve 85% reduction from the electricity sector. An example of that is our Ministry of Energy and Ministry of Agriculture have worked together on a budgeted plan, and they have opened tender in order to receive suggestions for like R&D for a dual use of agricultural fields. What I mean by that is, since, at least in Israel, and I'm sure it could be also a problem in other regions in the world, the land is becoming overpopulated. There are more buildings than there are trees. And we need to use that to our advantage and not to leave it as an obstacle. So one way of garnering the solar energy is to put solar panels on buildings, on ships, on cars, and so on, but also in agricultural fields. The problem with that is that once you put the panels, you actually have shade over the plants. And that was the call for R&D in order to solve this problem. And there were a lot of submissions, and hopefully we will get to implement that in the near future, as soon as possible, hopefully. What they have found, for example, is that in some cases, some plants actually need less sunlight. And in this case, a solar panel can be positioned there. Finally, 92% reduction in the municipal waste sector. It's basically separating the organic waste from the other waste and treating the organic waste. Okay. Here are some examples of the technologies. UBQ, that's a thermoplastic material. What it does is, this company, they take waste that includes organic waste and recyclables. So yes, it can be a dirty diaper, peels of banana, and paper, documents, whatever it is. They take it all together, and in some magic process that, of course, it's not revealed, they turn it into a product or a material that can be used or that can replace plastic. One of their biggest clients is McDonald's. You know these trays that in McDonald's you get your meal? These are made of UBQ material. Another client that they have is Mercedes-Benz. They have done a trial in which they're trying to replace the plastic material inside the car with UBQ. I will go over the other two very quickly. SG Tech. SG Tech, they work with biogas companies. Biogas companies are companies that take waste from the livestock and turn it into clean energy. However, there's a byproduct. And the byproduct is, by the way, called liquid digestate. This liquid digestate is used by the farmers as fertilizer. However, it emits to the environment a lot of harmful greenhouse gases. And also, it seeps into the earth, into the soil, and pollutes the water in near areas. So the farmers decided, well, we will use less over more space, which actually is worse because it just increases the emission from a larger area overall. So what SG Tech has done is making the process more efficient and increasing the energy production by 15%, which eventually reduced the land that is used for, that have used this digestate as fertilizer. They have reduced it by 95%. So sometimes, like one, if we look at it as a chain of process, sometimes if you intervene in one block or one step, it can make a huge difference along the road. Claritier, they take the plastic and they make out of it, how would I call it, like basic materials, wax, oils. That would be two materials, for example, that are used for other purposes. Okay, now we get to the star of the presentation, which is Watergen. Watergen is a relatively new technology. As far as I know, it is it's the only technology existing in the world, or at least it is the newest technology in water, in generating water. And it's based on very simple resource. So we have the air, which is an unlimited resource of water. And just the idea of taking the air and processing it, and on the spot, it can be turned into water, there's revolutionary. Because when you think about it, it will actually reduce the carbon footprint by reducing the transportation of the bottles of the water. Right? There's no need to transport the water. It's just on the spot. You can use it immediately. And it reduces plastic, which are used as containers or bottles to contain the water in order to be transported. What they have done is they have managed to create similar models on the basis of the same idea. And you can actually have a small device in the car. You can have this device also. I know I'm over time, I'm so sorry. We can have this device also on ships. And to think about it, there's no need to transport the water or to even keep it in containers. You can just have it on the spot. Maybe I will skip the video. right? This is an example of how diplomacy will change the world and save the climate. And that's just my objective opinion. Well, a year ago, we had the Abraham Accords, which is something that Israel is very excited about. We celebrated 1 year of the Abraham Accords last month. And here, we see something that it was unimaginable up until now. We see a collaboration between an Israeli company and a company in UAE. And working together, this other company is called Al-Dahra, and what they do is they focus on food security. So the project is to make installations of this device in agricultural fields, and, well, I mean, directly from or on the spot from the air to the plant, there is a water flow without any obstacles. I know I'm way over time, so I will just stop here. And I want to mention one last thing, just to refer to my first point, that nations of the world have to work together. Israel's emission of carbon to the environment is 0.18% of the world. It's, even if Israel reaches 0% emissions, it will not save the world. So this is just to emphasize that this is a collective effort, and without us collectively working together, it will not work. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Big applause, please. Now it's time for questions. Anyone have a question? No? I want to turn over to now Mr. Peter Norman Bangsbo, Executive Director of Denmark to Korea, please. He'll give a presentation on the topic of Denmark's approach towards net zero.
Thank you so much. Dear President, ambassadors, distinguished guests, it's a great honor for me to be here at the stage today in beautiful YEOSU, talking about carbon neutrality. Denmark is definitely a climate frontrunner. Our aim towards carbon neutrality started more than 50 years ago. We did it because there was a burning platform. The oil crisis led us to acknowledge that we should act now, 50 years ago. We have done that with very ambitious targets towards carbon neutrality. Denmark aspires to be becoming one of the world climate frontrunners, actually the most climate-friendly country in the world. Last year, in June 2020, our government decided a new climate plan, a new climate law, a binding law to lead us towards the goal of being carbon neutral in 2050. Actually, they are so ambitious that they said within 2030, 70% of our CO2 emission compared to 1990 levels will be removed. We are doing this in type of public-private partnerships with partners around the world. We are doing it together with our corporates, our universities. We are doing it with international partners. We are actually not able to meet our targets if we were not working with Korea and many of you around the world. Our ships seem to be, in the future, built here in Korea. Here in YEOSU, they are aiming towards establishing Danish windmills. We also have LG Chem's plant aiming towards creating more bioplastic to help the children around the world playing with environmental-friendly Lego. But what is most exciting is that it's actually cities like YEOSU, cities like Copenhagen, which are targeting climate in a very different way than national governments. I'm extremely proud of being a person from Copenhagen. Copenhagen decided back in the 90s that they want to be CO2 neutral already in 2025. This is only like 4 years from now. And I hope many of you know the Danes, when they mean business, it's rock and roll. So they have created a very holistic climate plan with specific, clear targets, how much to reach each year, and we are on the target, and we will be climate neutral in 2025. Oh, sorry, 2050. Let me rephrase that. 2025, yes. We are doing it together with academia, with our startups, but also the citizens. The citizens must also act. They must be educated, they must be engaged. I come from this flat country, it's like a pancake country, but they have really forced us all to bike around. This is how we see green mobility, an increasing of more green transportation. It's not electrical cars, it's more biking, it's more commitment from the citizens. One of the climate plan is divided into 4 topic area. But we can see throughout the documentation we have with the work we have done in the past that it requires a lot of investment. But basically the climate plan also documents that the investment put in have repaid back. It's a zero financially contribution. It creates better health, less air quality. It's providing better investments. So investing in climate is a good way forward. We see one of our biggest efforts has been on energy retrofitting of public and private houses. This is leading to better indoor air quality, better health. Energy retrofitting is definitely an investment, but it's also paying back in your own pocket every year once you have done it. The return of investment for energy retrofitting with new technologies is around 8 to 9 years. This is a solid business case. A business case I hope that many here in Korea could look into. But why are we a climate frontrunner? Why are we doing it differently? I don't think we are. But one thing we have done is really enforcing international collaboration and trying to engage our society so everybody can be a climate ambassador like myself. Creating new partnership, creating new business around green growth is a way forward. I was extremely pleased to hear that Ecuador is, that Uzbekistan is a part of Global Green Growth Institute. This is an initiative established by the Korean government, but also the Danish government and others, trying to create new type of partnerships which actually can create impact around the world, can create new knowledge, can create new export. I hope when YEOSU will be becoming the host of COP28 in 2023, that we will see a lot of Danish windmills, that we will see a lot of our circular economy or bioeconomy solutions tested, demonstrated, showcases here in YEOSU. This is what the Danish Embassy is working towards, creating demonstration on climate technologies around the world. I do believe that coming from the most happy nation in the world, that we are happy because we can see that we are individuals doing a difference. We are committed to this cause. It's painful to bike in the winter in Denmark, but we are doing it because we know that this is an effort we all must pay. We cannot do it without our startup community. The startup community is working very closely with all our cities around Denmark. The climate technologies that we have presented is actually a global inspiration, and hopefully it can lead to very concrete export opportunities. Not only energy retrofitting or renewable energy solutions like windmills and solar, but also more social aspects, social innovation, education on climate-friendly behavior, tech, you name it. The startup scene is the way forward to bring new ideas, to create green growth on the journey towards carbon neutrality. Thank you so much for your attention to my presentation. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, now, anyone has a question or comments to this presentation? So anyway,
yeah, I would really like to share knowledge with you. So now there's a good opportunity for you to ask questions.
So anyway, I guess as the Danish government has huge ambitious national target to reduce GHG as 75% by 2030.
Yes.
Yeah, this is an ambitious, huge national target, I guess. Israel also. No question? Thank you, Peter.
Thank you so much.
Now, the last speaker of the presentation is Mr. Amin Jagdaud, Second Secretary of Netherlands to Korea.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, both here and at home. I am the Second Secretary of the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, responsible for economic and climate affairs. And today, I will tell you a little bit more about Dutch climate policy and how that came to be. My presentation is structured as follows. First, I will tell you a little bit more about Dutch context. After that, I will tell you more about the road to the Dutch climate agreement. Then I will focus a little bit more on the local context. And finally, I will stress, like my colleague from the Israeli embassy, the importance of international cooperation. But first, let's talk about the Dutch context. Maybe you know, but the Netherlands, 1/3 of the Netherlands is below sea level. And half of the Dutch population lives in that area. So we have a lot of dikes, natural barriers, dams, and floodgates. But sometimes too much water is just too much. And that is something we saw just a couple of months ago when there was a massive storm in the Netherlands, but also in Belgium and in Germany. There was a very concentrated downpour of rain in a specific area, which resulted in floodings, and many people, Dutch people in the southern part of the Netherlands, needed to flee their homes, their businesses, so they experienced firsthand the effects of climate change. And because of that, our government also said that they would reassess all measures made to combat climate change, to see if and where fast response is necessary. You see also gas from Groningen, but I will touch upon that later when I will tell you a little bit more about the local context. But first, the road to the Dutch climate agreement. The Netherlands is committed to the goals set in Paris, and our government also wants to act in accordance with the general aim set in Paris. And also for the Netherlands, that meant that we needed to raise our ambition level, but we will do exactly that. Because, like my Danish colleague, we find it very important, and it is one of the most urgent topics in our time. How does the Netherlands do that? So, first of all, we are aiming to significantly curb emissions, and the Netherlands is also trying to reduce emissions by 95% by 2050. And we have an NDC at this moment for 2030 of 49%. And as you know, in the EU, there are also talks about the Fit for 55, so that percentage can also be bigger in the coming period. And this goal is also set by Dutch law. So the 49% and the 95%, they are mentioned in Dutch law. And how do we do that? So government, businesses, and civil society agreed to develop a joint action plan to reach that national goal, which is set in the law. And government engaged with this business and civil society because we want to use their expertise and also enhance societal support for the measures taken. And the focus would lie on 5 specific sectors. You can see them there on the left. And I can give you a couple of key measures that they agreed upon in the climate agreement of the Netherlands. For example, on electricity, the Netherlands aims in 2030 that 70% of the energy comes, of the electricity comes from renewables. Built environment, new buildings cannot be heated anymore by natural gases. And mobility, 100% of the new sold cars in 2030 should be net zero emission cars. Charging stations, and many, many more things are mentioned in that climate agreement. Then I also want to tell you a little bit more focused on 2 specific cities. First, Rotterdam. So Rotterdam also wanted to be even more ambitious because they see the dangers of climate change very clearly. They are one of the cities that is in that 1/3 below sea level. And it has a major port, the biggest one in Europe. So climate change really can affect them. So they did something similar to the national government. They made their own climate agreement, and they used people in the city, the universities, etc., to come up with 49 deals of how they want to tackle climate change. And now they have a leading role and are also an example for other cities in the Netherlands, and I think also in Europe and the rest of the world. They're now a front runner in sustainability, and they are trying to reduce carbon emissions by 2030 by half. But I think the most important thing is that they do not see climate change only as a problem, but also as an opportunity. And that is one of the things that the Netherlands is really focusing on, really also using climate change as a way to come up with new growth engines and to use all the opportunities that climate change also offers. Groningen, just briefly, Groningen has a lot of natural gases, but because of earthquakes, we're not extracting the gas anymore. And now the infrastructure that is in Groningen for the natural gases is being, they will use it for hydrogen. So all the pipelines will be used to make hydrogen pipelines. International cooperation, I can be brief on this topic, but international cooperation is fundamental. We cannot do this by ourselves. This is really one of the topics that we need to tackle globally. And the Netherlands is also, it is one of the keystones also of our climate change plan. So work together to co-create solutions, to think about what is needed in terms of like new growth engines, new markets, etc. But the most important thing is to work together to tackle this issue and combat climate change as a whole. Thank you very much. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Armin. Thank you for your good presentation. It's time for questions and comments. No? Thank you, Armin. Thank you. So this is the first part of our sessions. So we'll take 10 minutes. I guess it's 10 minutes? 15 minutes. Also, well, anyway, 10 minutes break. After that, we'll begin second part of sessions. Also, the panel discussions. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Urban Environmental Accords, UEA, is an international cooperative coalition of cities gathered to respond to the climate crisis and realize a sustainable planet. we are collaborating with the Korea International Cooperation Agency, KOICA, in the Global Training Program, the Climate Technology Center and Network, CTCN, an organization that implements the technical mechanism of the United Nations Framework Convention.
Okay, now we are going to move on to part 2, discussion session in a minute. So please take your seat. We're going to move on to part 2, discussion session in a minute. Please take your seat. Okay, discussion session will be starting soon, so take your seat. Thank you. Okay, welcome back everyone. The discussion session started. Before moving on to the discussion session, I would like to introduce another valuable person first. Let's meet Juan Carlos Caiza Rosero, Ambassador, Embassy of Colombia. So,
welcome.
Okay, so President Yoon Won-tae, Dr. Yoon Won-tae will lead the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back to our panel discussion on climate change and net zero emissions. As we know, more than half, as you know, that more than half of the world population reside in cities. That means the cities are consuming lots of energies, and the cities are producing significant amount of greenhouse gases. So cities are hotspots of vulnerability of exposure. So in dealing with climate change, every country and local governments should or need to develop resilient pathways. So today we have 6 brilliant and qualified discussants here who will address these important issues. Let me briefly introduce the panelists. My introduction will be very, very brief. First, His Excellency Daun Matute Mejia, Ambassador of Peru to Korea, will speak on extreme climate events and carbon neutrality. And we will hear from His Excellency Federico Alberto Coelho Camilo, Ambassador of Dominican Republic to Korea, who will speak on long-term climate strategies. And Mr. Rodrigo Coronel Quinnoc, Ambassador of Nicaragua to Korea, he will speak on development of resilience pathway. Then, Her Excellency Mbende Muyinji, Ambassador of Kenya to Korea, she will speak on the topic of building smart city for sustainable development. After that, Mr. Roberto Rizzo, Deputy Head of Mission of Italy to Korea, he will speak on the topic of energy transition to clean energy. And finally, we'll turn to Juan Carlos Caiza Rosero, Ambassador of Colombia to Korea. He will speak on Colombia towards low carbon and resilient pathways. So to facilitate our panel discussion, each speaker will take just 5 minutes. And after all topics, we'll have time for discussion and comments. Now, Ambassador, I want to invite Ambassador Daun Matute Mejia. We're going to start with you, please.
Thank you very much. Anya Samika. Thank you very much, Mr. General Secretary of the Urban Environment Accord, for put all together today, and also the mayor of the city who was here before. And I can see all the ambassador friends of mine, and also the distinguished diplomat who came in today. I'm going to try about extreme climate events and carbon neutrality. Climate change led to change in the frequency and severity to extreme events, such as heat waves, droughts, torrential rains, and floods, strong winds, or marine shocks. It can make its effects longer or more frequently, and have consequences from the point of view economic, productive, social, and even threaten people's life. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, EPCC, predict that extreme climate events such as high-intensity hurricanes, prolonged drought, and severe frost will occur more frequently in various regions of the world. In addition to the impact of infrastructure and large monetary losses associated with extreme climate events, the impact of natural ecosystem and represent a challenge for the development and maintenance of numerous economic activities and depend directly on them, deteriorating economic and social well-being. There is to date an average of 1.2 degrees warmer than at the end of the 19th century. This is mainly the result of an indiscriminate emission of greenhouse gases as a result of human activity. The increase in fossil fuel emission is causing global warming, increasing the amount of water vapor that the atmosphere can contain, generating more humidity in some areas, more droughts, and in other areas, heavy rains and storms are more frequent. Additionally, with the ocean relating more heat, hurricanes can be stronger and slower. For all of this, Peru recognized that decisive, articulate, and urgent action is necessary to limit an increase in the global average temperature to below 2 degrees centigrade, with respect to pre-industrial levels, and to continued effort to limit the increase in temperature to 1.5 centigrades. Peru is one of the 10 countries with the great biodiversity in the world, which encompasses ecosystem, species, and genetic resources that coexist with native people, who have developed an important cultural diversity associated with this biodiversity. Consequently, we are a country highly vulnerable to the effects of climate change. For this reason, in order to achieve the preservation of environmental quality for the benefit of people and the environment in an effective and coordinated manner, in 2008 was created in Peru the Ministry of the Environment. Our country has demonstrated its environmental leadership as president of the Conference of the Parties to the Framework Convention of Climate Change, COP20, in 2014, and the negotiation process toward the adoption of the Paris Agreement in 2015. We are also committed to work constructively to achieve the objectives set for COP26 and join forces to move multilaterally towards more ambitious commitment at the global levels. The Peruvian climate ambition is reflected in the creation of the solid environment governance through the fulfillment of the objective of the Paris Agreement, through the law of climate change, and the implementation of our nationally determined contribution, NDC, the availability of climate finance, technological development, and the strengthening of technical capacities are fundamental elements that will allow us to achieve the goals set out in our NDC. Regarding mitigation, Peru has committed to reduce its carbon emission by 40% by 2030, with the strong prospect of becoming a carbon-neutral country in 2050. In the case of adaptation, Peru will contribute to achieve the global goals of reducing current and future damage and consequent losses generated by the dangers associated with climate change, with a strong focus on sustainable development. We have established 92 adaptation measures prioritizing 7 areas: water, family, forest, fishing, and agriculture, health, tourism, and transportation. At the beginning of the year, the process of updating the National Strategy for Climate Change to 2050 began. With this defined the country's progressive transition toward carbon neutrality. I will stop here because I have too much. I have been taking too much time.
Thank you.
you.
Now, as the next speaker, I want to invite His Excellency Federico Alberto Coelho Camilo, Ambassador of Dominican Republic to Korea. You please.
Excellencies, Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen. In his speech to the General Assembly this year, Dominican President Luis Abinader declared that the Dominican Republic is a small island developing state which contributes little to global emissions, but which is highly vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Climate action, especially through adaptation, resilience, and financing, is of the highest priority for us. These words of President Abinader are a clear indication of how long-term climate strategies are of concern at the highest political level in the Dominican Republic. The stock of greenhouse gases already in the atmosphere can only decline by A, reducing emissions in sectors such as transportation, energy, industry and services, agriculture and commerce, as well as by households, and B, through nature-based solutions known in jargon as carbon sinks. The slowdown in the world economy arising from the sanitary shock of 2020 reduced emissions drastically, mainly in transportation and energy. According to the experts, this reduction was about 8%. 2021 paints an entirely different picture. The rebound in emissions has more than compensated the reductions of 2020. Extreme weather events altered rainfall patterns, raised temperatures to record levels in normally temperate areas, and disrupted energy markets in ways that illustrate many of the challenges ahead. The presentation by the Netherlands, I think, was pretty dramatic in that sense, showing the pictures of the flooding that they experienced during those unexpected rains last summer. So these are the things that we, unfortunately, will see more frequently, as mentioned by Ambassador Matute from Peru. The impact of the hot summer of 2021 is still being played out. Depleted reserves of coal and natural gas from the higher demand has increased prices just when carbon pricing schemes were being revamped, thus fanning the flames of inflation. Even blackouts have returned in more than one major country. Nothing will do more than to revert political support required for containing climate change than the return of inflation in the market for fuels, especially when alternative, non-polluting sources of baseline energy will not be generally available, such as nuclear or fuel cells, or continue to play an intermittent role, such as renewables. An early warning of this problem came up in France when taxes on fuels were enacted before mass transit systems were available for those most affected by the measures, those living in suburbs. The Yellow Vest movement that ensured forced French policies in transportation to adapt to the overlooked reality of so many who could not reach their workplaces without driving their cars in face of rising fuel prices. This is all happening just after the report by the International Energy Agency calling for stopping exploration of new oil fields if we are to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change calls for the formulation and communication of long-term, low greenhouse gas emission development strategies. These strategies, according to the Paris decision, should have been communicated to the UNFCCC by 2020. Unfortunately, unlike nationally determined contributions, long-term strategies are voluntary, despite their role in aligning domestic policies with the goal of keeping the rise of global temperature below 2 degrees Celsius. COVID-19 affected greatly the capacity for countries to comply with the reporting commitments. Barely 31 parties of the Paris Agreement have communicated their long-term strategies. Unlike long-term strategies, 192 parties did submit their nationally determined reduction strategies, and 12 have submitted their second nationally determined contributions. Can a series of nationally determined contributions play the role of properly formulated long-term strategies? Can greenhouse gas emissions be reduced to contain global warming when 95% of the resources are being allocated just to mitigation? This was a warning yesterday by Ban Ki-moon in his keynote speech to the International Urban Resilience Forum. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Yellow Vest movement in France and the ongoing crisis arising from the hot summer of 2021 leave no choice but to heed Ban Ki-moon's call to place adaptation at least on equal footing to mitigation. A prime example of this balanced approach can be found in the submission of the long-term strategy of the Republic of Korea. It prioritizes clean energies while capturing carbon emissions in the electricity sector. It seeks to mitigate pollution in industry while promoting the transition towards circular economy and the adoption of cleaner technologies. It is moving rapidly towards mass transit systems, which is the low-carbon alternative, while accelerating the transition towards alternative fuels in all modes of transport. It is fostering energy efficiency both in new and old buildings, while incentivizing the use of alternative energies to decarbonize electricity and heating in households. It is deploying smart technologies to minimize emissions in agriculture while seeking to reduce waste through the transition to a circular economy. And it is revamping the management of forestry to enhance their role as carbon sinks. The Korean long-term strategy is embodied in the new Green Deal, which has become very quickly the benchmark for countries like mine, and no doubt for many others as well. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the pledges of $100 billion per year made in Copenhagen back in 2009 have not materialized. Without the promised resources, the progress made in developed countries such as Korea will be offset very quickly by the lack of action in developing countries lacking the necessary resources. None of these countries, countries like Peru, like Colombia, like mine, and many represented here, none of our countries can be prevented from wanting to increase our standards of living by pursuing our own development policies. So we need these resources. These pledges have to be realized as soon as possible. The Dominican Republic hopes this year's COP in Glasgow will lead to tangible progress in all of these fronts, delivering on the promised resources, achieving a better balance between adaptation and mitigation, and ensuring that the transition towards a carbon-neutral future is not hampered by traumatic hiccups along the way. I thank you.
Thank you, Federico. Next, I want to invite Mr. Rodrigo Coronel Kinlock, Ambassador of Nicaragua to Korea. Please.
Thank you very much. First of all, I am very honored to be here. Actually, I think they put the presentation from Colombia. So maybe the Colombian ambassador will want to take it.
Yeah, if we want, yes, okay.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. First, I would like to explain very fast about Colombia. Colombia is one country of 1,100,000 kilometers square. If you visit Colombia, you can know Colombia has 7 worlds. 35% of the land of Colombia is Amazonian region. 15% of the land is Orinoquia region, Caribbean, Pacific, Chocobio Geográfico, and Andean region. My country has 2 strategy jungles in Latin America, Chocobio Geográfico and part of the Amazonian. The next month, the Royal Garden in London, the Botanic Garden of Kew, will declare that one of the top #1 area per kilometer square with the major biodiversity is one area in the north of Ecuador and the south of Colombia. In that way, I would like to say that 1 month ago, my president visited Korea and signed one joint declaration with Korea around the concept of inclusive innovation, sustainable and digital. We need to begin to work in several areas. One partner here is GCF, with projects, for example, with Amazonia or La Mojana, with GGGI, P4G, with Inter-American Development Bank, and the CAF, Latin American Bank. I would like to talk in that way that in Colombia, around Paris Agreement, my country, my president, 2019, decided that our goal is to have become carbon neutral by 2050. And last December, in our goal, thinking in 2030, is 51%. 51%. In that way, we need to reduce we need to no increase more than 169 million tons of emissions. In Colombia, we have 196 measures to control that mitigation in each sector. I would like to talk energy, for example, in the energy sector, we have the new platforms to move our country in a more clean matrix with alternative energies, thinking in 2030. In the case of Ministry of Commerce, we have a dialogue between private, public, and academic sector with the objective to reduce that emissions. This is some lines around the policy: circular economy, paramount protections, green education, ecosystem restoration, biodiversity cities. And this is the causes of our deforestation: land, minerals, crops, extreme cattle ranching, agricultural frontier. This is around the strategies. We have strategies in this point is a national security reason, because it's the second country more biodiversity and education and sustainable projects. Some outcomes, but finally, I would like to close my intervention with three messages. Number one, we would like to invite you to think these kind of solutions, not only as countries, as regions. For example, Amazonian is one Amazonian region. With GCF, we have a project with Amazonian. With Latin American Bank of CAF, we would like to develop one project. The name is Tropical Pacific, the countries between Costa Rica to Ecuador. It's a region, it's not only a country. My third message is, I would like to invite you to think P4G, one good opportunity. The first assembly was in Denmark, in the Scandinavian countries, second in Korea. We need to connect the knowledge and the experience and the innovation of these countries with Latin America in 2023 in Bogota. Why? Because Latin America is destined to, in agricultural projects, smart farms, and bioeconomy. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. You are exactly on time. Thank you again. Now, Rodrigo, you.
Thank you very much. So first of all, very honored to be here, and more than honor, I'm extremely happy because I see the smiling faces of my dear friends. That means a lot of countries have come together for this very important topic, which is zero emissions carbon neutral. It is a dream that we have to keep alive. Even though it seems so far away, we need to fight and talk about it every day. We cannot get tired of it. Let me tell you a very little and fast story about Nicaragua. Nicaragua is a country that only produces 0.02% of total global emissions. Yet, we are amongst the 10 most vulnerable countries in the world against climate change. Let that sink in. Based on this harsh reality, the government went into full throttle in green policy. In 2007, we went from dreams and hopes to actual actions and results. 30% of all the Nicaraguan territory is a protected area. We get 77% of our energy from renewable resources. We have put together a lot of engagement for citizens, but most important, education. Education on what it means to be one with nature and what it takes to take care of our planet. And for the future, children and their role with nature. Even though we have done all of this, recently we have been hit by 2 Category 5 hurricanes within a week of each other. So it is a harsh reality that we have to understand that this is not an issue of Nicaragua, it's an issue of the world. This is not an issue and a problem of the Nicaraguan people, it's a suffering of the world. So I believe personally that one of the things that we're missing is empathy. Because if we can truly feel the pain and suffering of the people that have lost their lives, that have lost their loved ones, that have lost their livelihoods with climate change, then we can start doing something about it. Until there is not empathy towards others and their suffering, there will be no action. It does not matter how many of these sessions we have. So we have to start with empathy and realizing how does it feel in the other person's shoes. And lastly, personal commitment. When was the last time you sit down and thought, what is my carbon footprint? Am I walking to places instead of taking my car? Am I recycling correctly? Am I doing the little actions that need to be done to save the planet? If I, as a person, don't do these things, how can I convince others to do them? Lastly, as I gather here with other diplomatic heads of missions, I ask, what is in your power to do to make your embassy have a less carbon footprint? What are you teaching your employees to make sure that you are the one setting the example? I don't say this to reproach the other ambassadors and friends of not doing things, but more of a hope that we have the power in ourselves to be the light to shine the example for a better planet. I sincerely hope that after today, we continue talking every day to other people, but most importantly, to have that personal commitment. And I'm more than glad to answer any questions later on in the discussion on actual examples my embassy has taken to do less of a carbon footprint. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Now, I want to invite Her Excellency Ambassador Muinje, Ambassador of Kenya to Korea, please.
Thank you. Excellencies, Secretary General, and all the distinguished guests here and online. It's indeed an honor to be here. This is my first time in this beautiful city of YEOSU, and Kenya's very privileged and very happy to be attending this important summit, which happens to come at a time when we're facing the pandemic, COVID-19, that has been devastating globally, and many people have lost their lives. But from where we stand, from where I stand, I believe that there's a silver lining to the COVID pandemic. I believe that COVID has served one purpose, and that is to awaken us to the collective need to heed the warnings of the scientific community. Though we received 4 warnings of a looming pandemic, and there were numerous calls for preparedness and the prioritization of prevention mechanisms that would ultimately save our lives, we completely ignored them as related to COVID. And of course, we all know the dire consequences that we've suffered. Today, we're sitting here discussing matters climate. I think it's a very positive thing. I think it offers us an opportunity to amplify our responses to climate change by urging, as everyone here has said, our countries to align their policies with green economy and, importantly, to bolster their contributions. I was asked to speak about Kenya's Kwanza Technopolis, which is a Kenya flagship project of the Economic Development Blueprint, which is Vision 2030. The smart city is located on about 5,000 acres of land. It's approximately 70 kilometers away from Nairobi, which is our capital city, and 47 kilometers away from our largest airport, that's the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. The Konza Technopolis was conceived by then the National Economic and Social Council, which I was privileged to be a part of. And from the very onset, its concept was clear. First, it was to develop a smart city that had a very strong value proposition for businesses that were presently located in Nairobi to relocate them out of the congestion that Nairobi is. As is the trend globally, Nairobi is rapidly populating, in fact, overpopulating. And if we look at the trends, over the past 60 years, our urban populations have grown fourfold. Today, there's over 56% of individuals that are urbanized. And the migration from the rural into the urban societies is about 1.4 million people per week. It's estimated that by 2050, we will have about 9.6 billion people living in urban cities. That means that we need more Konzas. Konza's second objective was to create an environment through which Kenya could harness the innovative potential of its youth. Therein, of course, stimulate what most people already know exists, which is a thriving tech ecosystem that is famously now referred to as the Silicon Savannah. We've actually taken a leaf from Korea. We understand very clearly the importance of building our human capital as a means of spurring economic development, and naturally, wealth creation goes alongside that. We recognize that in order to transform Kenya into a knowledge-based, industrialized, middle-income country, which is actually linked to our Vision 2030, we must be prepared then to do what needs to be done to develop the capacities for innovation. Otherwise, we will never participate fully in the new clean energy era. We need to develop engineers to develop new technologies. We need skilled labor to operate the factories using high-tech, zero-carbon components. And of course, we need to anchor all of this on a long-term foundation that integrates technologies into all these processes. It's against this backdrop, ladies and gentlemen, that Kenya birthed the Kenya Advanced Institute for Science and Technology, KAIST. The institution will hold national strategic significance for Kenya in that it will not only be the only institution of excellence of its kind in the entire continent of Africa, but one that will, in its fullest application, be modeled after and developed by your own world-renowned KAIST. We expect the groundbreaking to be within the next few months. Our president is going to preside over it. And we believe, without a shadow of doubt, that the Kenya KAIST will oversee the development and digitization of indigenous industries, just like it has here. And the consequence to that will be, it will trigger an economic revolution. Korea has, industries, they have companies, giants such as Samsung and LG and the countless companies we're all familiar with. It's our hope that, seeing as we have the foundation, that KAIST will serve Kenya in a similar fashion. And we believe that this digital transformation will not only focus on the economics, but also focus on the development of green energy solutions that we all agree are critical to promoting innovation in renewable energy sources. I think it's important here for me to just highlight how important this is to Kenya as it seeks to combat climate change and the escalating threat that it poses. As is the case with many African countries, and we've heard panelists here testifying to the same, though Kenya contributes to less than 1.5 greenhouse gas emissions, it suffers the brunt of climate change, and increasingly so. Our economy, for those who know, is largely dependent on rain-fed agriculture, and therefore we're susceptible to any climate change-induced ecological changes. Over the past 5 years, we've experienced extreme weather patterns that have been characterized by everything from locust invasions and droughts, such as the one Kenya is experiencing now, which threatens about 1.5 million people. And it manifests itself in different ways. One year, we have wilting crops, and the very next year, we have crops failing as a result of floods. These rains are so torrential, ladies and gentlemen, that landslides and the displacement of civilians have literally become the norm. Just visualize, for one moment, hundreds of thousands of children and women and the elderly huddled in temporary shelters where they struggle with inadequate water supplies, poor sanitation, and congestion. All this is compounded by a petri dish of vector-borne diseases, such as malaria, dengue fever, cholera, and typhoid. It is because of this suffering that Kenya is determined to mitigate this catastrophe, and why we have taken a very aggressive leadership role in mitigating and addressing the issues of climate change. We've developed policies and legislation that catalyzes the transition into a green economy, and we're at the front line as an advocate. All the bodies that we have heard here today, by and large, Kenya is a part of. We are signatory to the Paris Agreement. We're implementers of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. We're a member of the P4G. We are in the process of ascension to the GGGI. We actually hosted the first Sustainable Blue Economy Conference in 2018. Just this past week, as my president, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, was addressing the 76th United Nations General Assembly in New York, he indicated that Kenya is going to be co-hosting the second UN Ocean Conference with Portugal next year in June. Its goal is to galvanize commitments and partnerships that will promote global action and scale up the investments we have all here been agitating for, in the blue economy particularly, where it is crucial to Kenya and countless other vulnerable economies. As I conclude, I'd like to note with appreciation, ladies and gentlemen, that during the recently concluded P4G, which was hosted in Korea, His Excellency President Moon Jae-in demonstrated Korea's leadership and commitment to the reduction of carbon emissions by calling for global action that is driven by the spirit of mutual prosperity. For walking the talk, Kenya lauds Korea for its efforts to attain net zero goals, particularly as it relates to climate resilience projects in Kenya, which it has supported through KOICA, the Korea International Cooperation Agency. As we prepare for the COP26, which we hope is actually going to take place, and the opportunity that it's going to offer us to reboot multilateralism, I would like to urge each one of us here and watching to reflect on what our countries are doing for little countries such as Kenya, which are like the little hummingbird Professor Wangari Maathai, our Nobel laureate, once described. The little bird had discovered a forest fire that was spreading at an alarming rate, and it risked threatening all. This was just a little bird. She had not said it, she was not responsible for the fire, but yet she knew as a community member that if she did not do something to extinguish it, every single animal would perish. And so in her little own way, using her tiny little beak, this little bird took little trips to the water bodies around, the rivers, and tried as best she could to douse the flames, while much larger animals, including some with trunks, simply watched on. Excellencies, distinguished guests, Kenya has mustered the courage to commit to the attainment of net zero goals, and Kenya is doing its part. All we ask, along with you, the global community, is that you add wind beneath our wings. Kamsahamnida.
Thank you. As the last speaker, I want to invite Mr. Roberto Rizzo, Deputy Head of Mission of Italy to Korea. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for the listeners and the participants. I'll try to be short because of time restraint. While we are talking, we have two very big, important events that are taking place in Italy. One is the Youth COP, and one is the Pre-COP 26, which are organized by Italy in collaboration with the United Kingdom. And those two events are basically preparatory meetings for the COP26 that will take part at the beginning of November. As you can see from the presentations, the idea of these two events is to have the conclusions, discussions and conclusions that will be presented then during the summit meeting of the 26. The Youth COP, the event is called Youth for Climate Driving Ambition, is an event dedicated to the young people. And it tries to involve as much as possible the youth and the civil society. While the pre-COP 26 is a discussion that will take place after the Youth COP and that will deepen our ideas, all the ideas that have been shared during the Youth COP. For what concerns what my country is doing for the climate change, and especially in the field of greener energies, everything is based on the national plan that has been approved by the Italian government in 2019, the so-called Integrated National Plan for Energy and Climate 2030. The plan is a fundamental tool for our country to improve and to start the change that is necessary in our world and in our economies. The plan is structured in 5 lines of actions, from decarbonizations to energy efficiency and security, passing through the development of the internal energy market, research, innovations, and competitiveness. 10 are the Italian targets in the plan, among which the most important are, and the most important at all, is accelerate the path of decarbonization. Then adopt measures to improve the capacity of the renewable energies, promote energy efficiency in all sectors, promote the electrification of consumption, in particular in the civil sector and transport, and invest in research and innovations activities. I would like to underline 2 of these targets. One is to promote energy efficiency in all sectors. It has also been said by some of our colleagues that spoke today, it is important to save energy, not just to create energy from different sources. And we have the technological means to do it, especially in the house buildings. What my country is investing a lot in building houses that do not waste energy. And this is something that should be done also in many other countries, also in Korea. And Italy is working together with Korea to create, to improve, to help building new buildings that conserve energy in a better way, in a more efficient way. The other big topic is the acceleration of the path of decarbonization. Italy has committed by 2025 to shut down all the coal power plants that we are using at the moment in the country, which are not many, it's 8. But the process is a very expensive process, of course. It's a process that involves the private sector that is required to invest a lot in this process. And in this, we hope and we encourage also Korea to proceed in the field of reducing and phasing out the coal power plants. There are a lot of interesting data about the successes of my country in these fields. I don't think it's now important to cite all of them. What is important to say is there are going to be up and downs in this process. We need to underline especially the positive results. We can change, we can do something, we can improve our environment, we can improve our production of energies, we can improve our economy in these fields. And thanks to the new technologies, thanks to the new research, thanks to the new products that we are discovering with our universities all together in the world, we are discovering that there is also a benefit, not just for the environment, not just for our morale, but also for businessmen. Climate change and the fight and the fight against climate change can be also an important business opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roberto. So I hate to say that we are much behind of schedules. I can take just 1 or 2 questions from the floor. Anyone have questions? or later you can ask the panelists directly. Okay, I can see none of that. So, thank you. Thank you. This is all for second part of this session. Thank you very much for your discussions. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all the participating honored guests from Embassies. Thank you, Secretary General. Before we close this session, let us take a group photo to remember this meaningful occasion. So first, presenters, discussant, and Dr. Yoon, please come to the floor. Yeah, presenters, discussant, and Dr. Yoon.